Hello class, and welcome to our lecture on religious terminology, which is very, very important, by the way. So in this presentation, a brief overview of terms used by religious studies scholars will be discussed. So yes, we are going to be learning about the language of the discipline of religious studies. Now, as I mentioned before, studying these terms is important, for we'll be using this scholarly language to approach the course material. And heads up, if anyone has trouble fully grasping the meaning of these terms, do not worry, for the significance of these terms will become clearer over the next couple of weeks as we begin to use them. So practice makes perfect, as it were. So for now, just be aware of these terms, and of course, please feel free to ask any questions should they arise. Now, one important term that we will become familiar with in this course is religious worldview, which put simply is the way a religion views the world, its origin, its nature, and its purpose. So in terms of its origin, religious worldview reveals how the world came to be as believed by or taught by a religion, its nature, such as teachings on whether the world is good or evil and whether there exists any divine beings or being, as well as its purpose. So again, why is the world here? Why are we here? What is the purpose of human life, etc. So religious worldview reveals the answers to all of these questions within a religious tradition. Now, for a scholar to understand a religion as a whole, its teachings, its practices, its history, its rituals, it is important to grasp how a religion views the world. So again, its worldview. But for a scholar to understand a religion's worldview, he or she must identify a central object of worship called the absolute. And what is the absolute? The absolute, generally defined, refers to an unseen metaphysical object or concept that is considered ultimate and worthy of worship. And the absolute is often depicted as sacred or holy object that is considered higher or more ultimate than any other existing thing. And the absolute of a religion can take many different forms. It can be a god, a goddess, a pantheon of gods and goddesses. It can be a life force, a spiritual reality, etc. In addition, an absolute can be expressed in two different ways. We can have theological absolutes and non-theological absolutes. So in terms of a theological absolute, this is when the absolute is considered intelligent, that is self-aware, it exercises reason and desire. So if you're reading a creation account and it seems like the creator being is self-aware, that it actually plans things out, that it demonstrates some kind of intelligence, then we are talking about a theological absolute. And there's two ways in which a theological absolute can be expressed. Polytheism, which means that the absolute consists of many gods, goddesses, or beings, and monotheism, where an absolute is composed of a single or one god, goddess, or being. Now, to further break this down, there are two ways of expressing a theological absolute. That is, we have anthropomorphic absolutes and formless. So an anthropomorphic absolute means that the being or force or spirit expresses some kind of human characteristics, whether it's physical or emotional. So again, if you're reading a creation account and it seems like the deity has arms, legs, expresses emotion, then that would refer to an anthropomorphic absolute. However, if the being or god or goddess, etc., is formless, then it expresses more abstract qualities. That is, it doesn't really have any human physical or emotional characteristics. So again, it's a being which has greater abstraction. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that a formless being is impersonal or without care, but rather these emotions are above human forms. And it's more often described as a being or force. Now, we also have a non-theological absolute, which is an absolute which is without intelligence, without self-awareness, reason, and desire. So, for example, when we discuss Taoism, we're going to find that the force of Tao is often expressed as non-theological. Now, there are two ways in which we can express a non-theological absolute. Pluralism and monism. Pluralism means that the absolute is composed of many forces, realities, or substances, and monism means that the absolute is composed of a single ultimate force, reality, or substance. Now, once the absolute of a religion has been identified, three theological issues can be addressed. Issues of cosmology, teleology, and soteriology. So these are fancy Greek terms that mean, for cosmology, the origin and nature of the world, teleology, the purpose of the world, and soteriology, which refers to the human condition and the human purpose. So the absolute of a religion is linked to addressing these issues or theological questions. So for example, let's say that we belong to a religion where we worship an all-powerful goddess. Well, chances are that goddess created the world for a reason, and created human beings for a reason. So again, ultimately, the absolute is going to be connected to addressing these theological issues. Now this all sounds well and good. Yeah, just identify the absolute and all the answers of a religion will be revealed to you. But there is an issue. Identifying the absolute of a religion is easier said than done. Okay, why? Because most religious literature is written in poetic style and is therefore open to interpretation. Thus, at times, a religion's teachings can be difficult to decipher. That is, one popular form of religious literature that can often be ambiguous in meaning is mythology. And mythology refers to stories written or spoken in poetic language which reveal a deeper religious meaning. Now, although mythology is often beautiful in expression and provocative in terms of content, the underlying message is ambiguous, meaning unclear and open to interpretation. So, for example, if I gave a poem out to our class and asked you all to interpret that poem, chances are I would get different interpretations from everyone. There might be some kind of like similar motifs that you all shared or a few of you shared, but again, we're going to get different interpretations. So just when you throw a piece of mythology in front of a religious studies scholar or a theologian, chances are there's going to be differences in interpretation. So be prepared, for we will be reading a great deal of mythology, and chances are what we shall find is that we will often disagree as to the meaning of such mythological literature. Now, many might say, well, this is a con, but I think it's a pro, because this can lead to very interesting conversations.